couple of weeks ago, my younger son came up to me and said, "Dad, I want to build a bird buffet." Now, to be totally honest, I've never heard of a bird buffet before this. So he had to draw me a picture and say, this is what it would look like. And his whole idea is he wants to make our backyard more hospitable for different birds to come by, have a snack, and find different supplies they might need to make their home a little bit more comfortable. Very sweet thing for a 9-year-old to do. So we took his idea, we made it, and now we have a bird buffet in my backyard. And yes, the birds are coming and going from it. But this whole process that I went through with my 9-year-old made me think of something that I've repeated to you on a number of different occasions. It's a quote from Pope Benedict XVI. Each of us is the result of a thought of God. Each of us is willed, each of us is loved, each of us is necessary. Now, in much the same way as my 9-year-old has ideas like bird buffets, and to be fair, a number of other creative projects,
He did it.
God has ideas. God is the most creative being that there is. And so everything that God creates, he creates on purpose. He creates with a reason. And we see that in the whole world, in the whole universe around us. But what the Pope was trying to emphasize to us is that you are something. You are someone who was created on purpose as a result of a thought of God. And in much the same way as my son had this idea, designed it, made it, and now treasures it, God designed you. God made you. And God treasures you. Now, this might not sound like it's something terribly earth-shattering or surprising. Maybe you already know this. Maybe you already believe this. But then again, maybe you don't. Because for a lot of us, we can find ourselves kind of stuck in a bit of negative self-talk. In those moments where we find ourselves alone and in silence, looking at ourselves in the mirror, laying awake in our beds, there are certain things we say about ourselves that don't reflect this idea that we are the result of a thought of God. We are loved, we are willed, we are necessary. In fact, what we might think or what we might say to ourselves is the opposite. And one of the great gifts God has given us is a place we can go to be reminded of this reality, that we are in fact a result of the thought of God. A place that we can go to be reminded that God does in fact love us, because God is love. That's the Bible. God's word there, from cover to cover, emphasizes his love, his care, and his compassion for each of us. So for example, if the thing you say to yourself when you're looking in the mirror is, "I don't matter," well, in Matthew chapter 10, Jesus talks about how every sparrow that falls from the sky is known by God. And Jesus says, you are worth more than many sparrows. If the self-talk when you're laying awake at night is that I don't really matter, I'm an accident, I'm a mistake. Well, Psalm 139 tells us, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. If you're somebody who spends a lot of time laying awake at night thinking about the things that you're afraid of, and not just the little ones like the dark and clowns and heights, but fears of being alone, fears of failure. Well, one of the phrases that's repeated over and over and over again in the Bible is some variation or some version of be not afraid, or do not be afraid, or do not fear. One of my favorites comes from the prophet Isaiah, where he says, do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. If you spend a lot of time dwelling on your weaknesses, or the ways in which you don't live up even to what you think you should be, let alone what God would want you to be. The second letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians, we read, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. If the thing that you dwell on is the fact that you screwed something up, you made a mistake, you feel like you're defined by a weakness or a failure in your life, well, think of Psalm 103, where we read, so far as the east is from the west, so far he has removed our transgressions from us. I'd encourage you to take some time, not just to take my word for it, but to read it for yourself. Open up the Gospels and see what Jesus says to people like you, like me, who get scared, who wonder where we fit into the world around us, who feel like we've screwed up pretty badly. What you'll find is he never gives up on them. and He'll never give up on you.